Hey boys and girls. Yeah, this is sort of a testery to see if it's something I like to do. Um, yeah. I don't know if it's something I like to do over time, but we will see how it goes and what people think about it and if they even learn something from it. That's the biggest part, because else it's just a waste of time, to be honest. Uh, but uh, my plan was to start something like, uh, yeah, uh, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, I needed to look at my program or my thingamajig I wanted to do. Right. Um, this file might seem really, really, really complicated, but yeah, as you can see in the corner, it's called test results. It's it's a file the game makes so it knows how the car can drive, and the AI use it as how they can drive. Um, and there's a lot of useful data in it. Something I use it a lot to figure out what gearing I want in a car. Um, and I usually run pretty long gears, just to not have massive acceleration out of the corners. It might seem a bit counterproductive, but a lot of the cars is really tail heavy, and if you have less acceleration out of the corners, they're of course going to go less sideways. Um, and so we're gonna just show some bits and bobs of this file. Uh, this section here is a torque and power scale of the let me just find it. It's the NGT Viper, because that's a really good example of a really torque heavy car that doesn't really like doing RPM. So you might as well uh, take advantage of that massive amount of torque that it has. Um, and let's see here, it says peak power is at 6224 RPM, and max RPM is 600 RPM later. But if we look at the torque scale where it has max power, yeah, it's about where it had max power. It actually has max power at, yeah, just there. Um, and then the power drops quite fast. So at the limiter, it only has 405, and that's kilowatts. I don't know why the game shows kilowatts, but it does. It's something to do with if it's imperial or metric, because in Germany they use kilowatts. So I think it's leftover from the Giant's engine, maybe, or else I don't know why they do it. But they just might do it because of the imperial and metric, because metric is set to kilowatts, where imperial is set to horsepower. Let's just see. Yeah, but you can see here that the torque, we have max torque up here, there. It's 744. And if you take it around 6500 RPM, it's already dropped by 100. And you really, to get down to that torque scale, you can actually go all the way down to 37, 31, and it still has the same torque. So you actually have quite a large torque band that you can take advantage of because it's a really lazy engine doing RPM, so you might as well drive it on the torque instead. Because torque gives acceleration and horsepower gives speed. That's more or less the gist of it. But what I would do is maybe I would actually not take that much advantage over horsepower. I might shift right around that moment, but I'm gonna shift like 1500 RPM back. I'm gonna go on my gearing just because of all the torque, and you can take advantage of it. So you hit the point where it still has a lot of torque. 1500 is 4730. And there the horsepower rises quite a bit. So you get advantage of the horsepower raising and the engine still having a lot of torque. Um, you might want to do it a bit later, but that's more or less that you can see from how you're driving and how it feels in game, because numbers are just numbers. It's all about how you feel about the car and how easy you have to take advantage of the torque. Because base game, the Viper has a really short gear ratio, so you pretty much spend all your time shifting gears, where it maybe drops 1,000 RPM, and then you don't really take advantage of all the grunt the engine has, and that will make you slower. Because you spend so much time changing gears that you don't really have a gear that fits any corner. It's not like you can, let's take a third gear corner in a decent setup car, where if you have short gear ratios, you're gonna be half through the corner. You're gonna have a lot of rotation on the car being in a much more RPM heavy gear, but you're going to have to shift gear in the middle of the corner, and that's gonna unsettle the car each time you shift gear. So it might be better just to take a lot of the corner in the same gear and have that. It's down to 0.0 something millisecond or milliseconds difference that's gonna be if you change gear to the corner, and over time it's not really going to matter, because in long corners you have a lot. You have like third gear that you know I can push it almost to the limiter in this gear and still keep the optimal corner speed that the tires can handle. Um, and if you change gear, you're gonna have more accelerate or more speed to do with, and it's pretty hard holding it in that area where you might only run half throttle to get around the corner because your gear is actually too long for that corner. Um, but a lot of people do it like that, and I don't really know why they do it. Because the feeling is that you're a lot faster if you can stay in the same gear. And you can pretty much go, I won't say you can go full throttle, but maybe 80, 90% around that corner. and just keep up the same speed. And then on your way out, as soon as the corner levels out, you just change gear. Just just that if it's up in the near the peak power RPM, you can just change gear because it's not going to matter. It's the difference is so little that you can't see it on the lap time. Um, and that's more or less it. It's a bit more complicated, but it's something you learn by doing over time, and it's something you start getting a feeling for. Um, what did I want to say? Yeah, it's just something you get a feeling for, um, uh, and it's just experience. Um, that's more or less it. And now a lot of people talk about aero and what the optimal wing is because it really differs what is actually an advantage. Because a lot of people think if you run zero wing, you're gonna have all the speed, but that's not really true. Because let's take something like the Porsche 992 GT3. This is the front wing, and that's just fixed like we know in game. So it just has one option, and you can't do anything about that option. But it gives some numbers they're not really important. Um, um, this car is actually different. No, it isn't. Um, but they might. I don't think they're gonna change it. They might change it on some of the cars because in some of the classes you can either have a fixed front wing or a fixed rear wing, and especially with the LMGH cars, it's not all the cars that has an adjustable rear wing. I can't remember if they ran this year, or it was last year. But at some point there was a car at Le Mans which ran adjustable front wing instead of a rear wing, and I won't say they cheated, but they had a rear wing with, I won't say zero drag and downforce, but they had a decent amount of downforce, and with the angle it had almost no drag. Um, so they didn't have an advantage of doing anything to it. They could have gotten more downforce, but downforce and drag causes top speed. And on Le Mans, you need all the top speed you can get. Everything of it. Uh, because that the straights are so long, you can miss a lot of speed by it, and Le Mans is all about speed. Corner speed isn't that important, or it is important, but if you're either doing 300 or you're doing 330 kilometers an hour on the straight, that's quite a big difference. And to take fast corners, you don't need massive amounts of aero. That's You can do it with not that much aero and do the turning in corners with setup. You are gonna hurt the tires more than the regular people or regular cars. Uh, but it sort of evens out, and sometimes the gamble is worth it. because when the when the track gets cold, more front downforce is actually an advantage because you're gonna get higher front temps, and a cold tire on a cold track isn't a good idea. We all know that from PMR just running cold tires into a second gear corner, and it's just all over understeer all over the place. And that's just how it is. But this section here, as you can see the writing, it says rear wing. Whoopsie daisy. Well, here we have all the numbers for the degrees the rear wing can be set. I'm just gonna do it like this so it's easier to read. Where we have 0 and 1 to 9. This is the active downforce you get. Um, I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are, but it doesn't really matter. But you can see the numbers raising, and that's just downforce. And you can see here is an explanation that 1.39 in minus is around 654 pounds of downforce. Uh, and this number is drag, and that number equals to 188 pounds of drag. But as someone that's keeping an eye on the numbers, you will see that there is a ratio here when the drag raises more percentage-wise than the downforce. And that's pretty much how you find the optimal range, because if we take rearing at 0, it has 0.166 minus downforce and 0.155 drag. But if you just go one up, you suddenly have almost twice the downforce, but only a little bit more drag. And you can see that continues down here where you raise a bit in drag, but gain a lot of downforce. And you sort of get to an optimal number where you need to get the calculator found from the desk, where you divide the numbers with each other. Let's take an example. Let's say we take 3 degrees, that's 0.75 divided by 0.2. So per 0.1 in drag, you get 3.75 or 0.375 in downforce. And that's easy to calculate. But if we go up to something like 7, where it's 1.39 divided by 0.4, we're not getting the same ratio of downforce as we were before. So we're getting more drag than we get the. Let me just use people are reading. Yeah, Brian, I'll do that. I just wanted to do a short explanation, and I know this is kind of PC players have this advantage that they can go in and see all the files and get an idea for how to set up the rear wing. But GT3 being GT3. It's pretty much the same on them all. There's a few differences in front downforce, um, and that's about it. That's pretty much the only difference between them. Um, but I think we're gonna start PMR now. But I'm just gonna do something for the curious viewer. I'm gonna do this. This is gonna take some time, so I'm just gonna smoke a cigarette while it finishes. Whoops, I forgot to unmute the mic. But what I was saying is the hours in the game should maybe give a little pointer towards why I'm fast. Just a tiny bit of pointer to why that could be. Um, and I'm the kind of person that when I want to do something, I put a lot of hours into it. Just because I take a decision that I want to be good at it. Um, that's more or less it. Let's start up PMR. If it wants to start, that is. If you had any questions to the first section of it, that's about now that you should do those before we start with this, because I get too focused. Uh, let's see what we want to do. Yeah, I think we're gonna take Kyalami. And talking about Vipers, we are going to take this Viper. Because all the Vipers pretty much have the same engine. Pretty much. They still have a big lazy engine. That doesn't really like RPM. And that's just how it is with a big leader V10. And especially with the kind of restrictions that the engine has. But for this track, we are going to start putting in a bit more wing. And that's about it. And maybe lose some fuel. And lose the traction control a bit, just to start with. That's about it. I actually forgot something. Just to give myself an idea about how fast I can be, or how fast I should be. Yeah, Brian, I do that sort of depending on the track. Rear wing doesn't matter that much on Kyalami. It matters for the two long fourth gear corners. But for all the slow corners, it doesn't matter that much. 70 minutes, yeah. Let's see if we can keep up with this guy. As you can see, this has pretty short gear ratios. See, in this corner, it would actually be an advantage to have a longer second gear, because you're almost maxed out in the middle of the corner. This gear, corner, fourth gear sort of fits. Let's see if we can do third in this. Yeah, third is better. But yeah, in the files I mostly I don't often look into the arrow because
you know the drill, mate. Take it easy for the first few laps.
Because the middle ground is around between 3 and 5. That's the middle ground. Where the torque versus drag is about the same. See here, third is too long because we're doing almost no RPM in third gear through that corner. and it's hitting the GC. That doesn't really matter this much with this car. But it's kind of an odd car, this car, because the stock setup is actually pretty good. I'm not really having any understeer. But there is something doing that I can't keep up with the AI 100. And you can see in that corner, maybe not notice. My second was a bit short. And we could maybe have had it touch the TC less by having a bit longer gear. You can see it, we're almost at the limiter. We're actually over the point where we have a lot of power just on the straight. Let's see if we can push them more now the tires are hot. Actually a bit too hot, but can't push more in that corner. That's just gonna eat the tires up. I actually forgot. Whoops. Yeah, that was some phasing. I'm just gonna move it so we can see the scoreboard also. That I'd forgotten. But it's because I'm running triple screens. So I have like this widget and this widget I have on a different screen. And also a scoreboard, because it's not really important and it just confuses people, or it confuses me. We can't grab that one, let's just move that one up so we can see the time difference also. But what we learned from that was that we might not have the best turn in. So the first thing I would do was try and make the front anti-roll bar more stiff, because that's just gonna make the car more stable, and it's going to make the car roll less in the corner. And let's see if that made any difference. I actually want to make the gears longer. That I forgot. I think we had too much fuel. Yeah, we did. And what I mostly do, as you can see on the steering widgets, is if it's qualifying, I normally try to heat up my tires just by really overturning the car. Especially if you start with cold tires. Just overturning the car and letting it understeer. That was an AI. Whoops. But this track is in hot conditions and the track is a good temperature. So the difference between the track, the tires and the track isn't that high, and the track is going to help keeping the tire temp up. Do you have any more questions, Brian? While I'm just sitting here looking out in the air. Whoops. Don't look at the jet and drive. That actually gave us some.
Take it steady for the first 2 laps, mate. Tires are cold. I'll let you know when they're in the window.
Or not just Brian having questions, but does anyone have any questions? See, that corner second gear is a bit longer, so we don't have that much horsepower doing anything to the wheels. It could be a bit longer for that corner, but just gonna let that AI overtake. Yeah, don't think we need to heat up the front tires anymore now. But as someone might notice left down corner, it's not that often that my brake pedal goes to 100. That's just because I have a low cell pedal, and I set it so stiff that I really have to stomp on it to make it go to 100. Just because it makes it, like in a GT3 car, you can sometimes raise the pressure without it going on the TC, and it's only going on the TC when you really panic brake, which on some, like the Red Bull ring, where you have 2 first gear corners, and I often get distracted because the straight is so long. So I often forget to brake. You could see in that corner that I just stayed in a high gear, because with this car it doesn't really matter what gear you're in. Bran, I don't know if I have a process, to be honest. I sometimes just jump in at the deep ends, try a few laps, see if there's something I think I can do with my limited knowledge about setups. And if there isn't anything I can figure out by myself, I normally just show the setup to ChatGPT and tell it what I feel and what I would like the car to do. I don't know if it's visible on the video, but the turn-in is actually much sharper around 60 miles an hour just by touching the anti-roll bar. And AI is beating me like I can't drive. And Legolas with brake temp, with how much brake cooling all the cars have in the game, that the brakes has so much cooling that I think on an LMGH car with a lot of regen you can maybe overheat the front tires. But you really have to be hard on it to do that. Because it's not actually fast enough to really heat up the tires, where you have like doing 200 miles an hour into a first gear corner. That doesn't really happen on any track besides the new test track. So on the test track you could maybe get it into whoops, ran out of talent. Let's see. Bran, you wouldn't apply it per se. It's more something that you put in the back of your mind that, like, if a car is really RPM heavy, because if it's really RPM heavy, it doesn't have a lot of torque. So there you actually need to take advantage of all the horsepower, because something like the RX-7 GTO it doesn't have a lot of torque because it's a rotary, and a rotary needs RPM to really work. So with that car you actually want maybe a really long first gear and then just having the rest of the gears on top of each other. And tire pressures are a bit, I'm not gonna say it's a bit of a black magic thing, at least for me, but it really depends on the race, because to be honest, I think if it's a sprint race, you want your tires to get up to temperature really fast if you start on cold tires. But if it's on preheated tires, I wouldn't say that it matters that much, because the grip between 70 Celsius and 90 Celsius isn't that huge. It's maybe, let's say, 10%, where from starting without preheated tires on a winter track where you maybe stay start at 20. There you need to think about that you need to keep the temperatures up. Yeah, I can do that, guess. But getting back to tire pressure, if it's a cold track and like a 10 lap race, I would run maybe 10% higher pressure or thereabouts. I'll really test it. It really depends on track conditions, because you're still gonna hit a limit where whatever you do, the tires are not getting any hotter. And that's more something you need to test, because it depends on your driving style. Like if you're really hard on the front tires, you maybe not need that much more pressure in them. Because more pressure means that you drive on the inner middle part of the tire, and you might get heat fast. But with it riding on that, you are maybe getting to lap, let's say 5 or 6, where you've worn the tire that much that it's kind of flat now. So it runs on the whole tire, because you wore out the middle part of it riding so much on that. That's actually a big advantage. That it can be a big advantage, because let's just restart and see if we can follow AI. Yeah, so with the GT cars, it's pretty easy to cook the tires. It's like I think it's too easy, because on a track like just on a track like Kyalami, you can completely cook all the tires. And I don't know why they made them like that. Because you can't really solve it by running less pressure. Because if you run too little pressure, you're just gonna ride on the outside of the tires, and you're gonna have a lot more tire roll. Oops. Yeah, the AI is at 100. And you can see even with these temps, because the tire has so much grip over 70 degrees. If you have enough downforce and turning on your setup, you can take that flat if you want. But the most important part about Spa is everyone learns to always ride the curve. But with PMR being a game, the tires are actually built. They have a lot of sideways grip, where you can push it, where you can actually drive the car at 105% all the time. It is something they are gonna fix with Aris's overhaul of them, where you get punished for overdriving them, like you do in the NDT class. And I have my own opinion about making them that way, but that's just me, because I think some of it is forced difficulty. Because something like a GT3 with that's modern and have the best tires in the world, or don't have the best tires in the world, but the technology is so new and the tires are built to the tires is the newest technology for tires that they can do. So they have, I know they're built to spec, but they have massive amounts of grip, and they don't wear out that fast. And they keep their heat really well. Because if, like let's say that you can't push them 105, just 105%, you would never get new best lap times. You would never do that. That wouldn't be possible because you can't push the limit. What was I saying? So putting a tire limit into games is sort of, it's just making the game harder, and I think by doing that you make the skill gap between a regular player and a really good player, you make that higher so that like something like let's take rank where I think there's 5 divisions. I'm a bit hard on the tires. Whereas maybe right now Division 1 is fast depending on the player. At some point it was a bit shit, too easy. I don't have penalties on. It was a bit too easy to get into Division 1 because you don't really get kicked out of a division even though you don't play, and you could do really well in the license test. So there might, even in Division 1, there might be 4 seconds between the fastest and the slowest. But I just think if you put in forced difficulty, you're gonna end up with a much higher gap.
Impressive stuff, mate. That's the fastest lap of anyone.
Whoops. That was too much. Let's just let the AI pass. You're just gonna end up with a massive skill gap because some people, like, let's take something like wheel settings. In PMR, wheel settings are so important that a lot of people miss it and just think, oh, the FFB or force feedback is shit in the game, or something like that. I think I've spent maybe 20 hours finding the way I wanted the force feedback to be. And that's really important because the game can do a lot of things, but something like a modern direct drive base have so many options that you can play with. I have a Mosa, so there's like 2 million different combinations you can do in Pit House. So you're never done playing with it. Because you can always find a place where you can in Pit House it's split into hertz where you can go 100% or I think you can go 300%. So something like, so you could boost something like just having understeer. You could make the reel really shake when you're doing understeer, and mine does that, sort of. It vibrates a little like a controller when I hit the limit. That was slow. And I don't quite I don't know why people don't do it like that, because they say, oh, I don't feel anything when the car understeers. Because I think the most base settings, the wheelbase just more or less shuts off. when the car's understeering. And that just gives an off feeling that if you turn the wheel like, I don't know, 5 degrees, then the force feedback comes back. And that just gives an off feeling where you can't really control the understeer. Because at the moment my wheel have some sideways movement, where it doesn't shake, but it sort of goes a bit side to side, where when the car understeers, it vibrates, not super hard, but it does vibrate. So you sort of know when the wheel, you learn when the wheel vibrates, you're hitting understeer. And what else I gonna say? And you sort of get the feeling of it, especially in this corner, because you can be quite aggressive and still get around the corner. And there's places where I've gone like, I don't know, a second faster than this. And there is places where you can push really hard, compared to how much you actually should be able to push, just because you can take so much advantage over the slip angle, because maybe at steering input like this it doesn't understeer, but sometimes you can go over the limits, and yes, you get understeer, but the car still turns a lot better, or not a lot better, but it turns a little bit better. I'm just gonna pit, then I can show you battery.
Limits are on. Look for the box.
Just because it's easier on Bathurst. On a track like this, you might want to turn it on, especially if you're doing ranked on here, because everyone is gonna crash in the first corner, and that might break your hand if someone hits you side on with 150 miles an hour. That might not be nice. But that's about it. The funny part about this wheel is that it also has Bluetooth, so you can actually control all these settings from your phone. That's how it's done on console, but unfortunately they don't have a base for PlayStation, but they have a wheel for Xbox. But that can't be used on all wheelbases. I think it's up to R12, maybe. That's 12 Newton meters. But over that, they can't really be used, because I don't think the game can figure out how to translate it or something. It's something I don't know that much about. But controls. What gave the most understeer vibration was rumble strength. Uh, I could even put it even higher, but I feel like it's at a good point now, where it doesn't matter that much, or where it's good enough for what I can feel. Um, um, but you can also turn down smoothing to get more crazy action, or not crazy, but more like the GT cars have a very wild, uh, lively steering, um, where it's sometimes really shakes the steering like it's 15 degrees to one side. Um, uh, so on those cars, I wouldn't give it more smoothing or less smoothing because you're just gonna get your arms ripped off. But something like a GT3, you could turn it quite a lot down and get more feeling for the car. Um, because the vibrations from a GT3 it's not that many or not that much. So you're gonna feel a lot more what the car is doing. Um, but that's just down to preference. I've gotten so used to these settings that I just adapt to each car. I figure it out within, let's say, 2 laps, what it feels like when the car is understeering, oversteering, uh, not turning the way I want. Um, yeah, battery. You. I don't think people can copy each other's settings, um, because it's so very different from what people feel, or think they should feel, or not think what they want to feel. Um, it's so very different because everyone has an idea about how force feedback should feel. That's also why many people say that, oh, it's shit because blah 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 blah. It doesn't feel like ACC, or it doesn't feel like iRacing or one of the others. But you can't really. Force feedback is never going to be the same. Every company is going to tackle it in a different way. And the way S4 did it is that there's a ton of settings that you can play with. Um, and let's return to pit. Uh, I've tried. I normally don't play a lot with the settings. I was just testing something. Uh, yeah, battery. It should feel natural and how you expect it to feel. But that's just playing with the seconds or settings. But I just think people should spend a lot more time playing with. A lot of people that complain is the one with direct drive basis, and they have so many options that they can play with uh, before they should look at the game. Um, because I would say 95% of the force feedback is all wheelbase. You might want to change those settings we just looked at, to sort of to something basic. where you have headroom both up and down if you want to feel more understeer, less understeer, more braking, more steering, a lot more resistance on the steering. Um, because my settings isn't perfect, to be honest. Um, on something like a LMP car, the steering is heavy as hell. Like it would be that in real life because it doesn't have power steering and it has wide tires. But I sometimes turn down the force feedback or the friction. I sometimes turn that down, so it's a lot easier to turn. Um, but it's not. I normally just adjust to how it feels. But that's just me. Yeah, battery. I understand that too. Because a lot of people just want it to work. Um, and it does that. It's you can something like the AMS2 I quite like just because of the track selection and the car selection. I find it quite fun and race room too. Um, but in AMS you sort of need a custom force feedback profile. That's I can't remember his name now. He made it makes it a lot better, but it works out of the box. To be honest. Um, But with that game, I also think each car has its own force feedback profile that you can't touch. So it's all done in the settings. It's that file is translated to how to or converted to how the settings are in the menu, and they've done that for each car and made it pretty perfect. To be honest, where it's just in the settings you configure your wheel and you get the same feeling for almost every car in the game. Some of the cars you do need to adjust it,